Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe. Today I'll be at last dealing with the Angmar Wars, a subject I've promised for a while alongside the founding of Arnor and Gondor, which I'm going to do in a separate series as there's a lot of detail around that, and I want to make that a different kind of video. As to the fall of Arnor, happened slowly over time. Beginning of the Angmar Wars is tied in with the collapse of Arnor. The fall began with the succession of Eorendar, the 10th king of Arnor. Arnor and Gondor had originally been tied up together, but with the death of Isildur and the failure on the part of his line to press their claim to the high kingship of Arnor and Gondor upon the kings of Gondor, themselves the descendants of Anarion, Arnor and Gondor became permanently split for almost the entirety of the remainder of the Third Age. As to Eorendar, upon his succession to his father Elendar in the year 777 of the Third Age, Eorendar was to remain unchallenged throughout his reign, and it was largely uneventful. But this was not to say that it was a successful reign. It was a reign that was dogged by factional infighting, as he had had two sons too many, with the old man, by the time of 861 of the Third Age, unable to properly decide upon an heir. So they chose the most dreaded form of succession, Gavelkind. Splitting his realm between his three sons, it was his hope that they might make peace. The eldest son got Arthedain, the next son got Cardolan, and the third Rhudaur. The eldest son and the rightful heir to the throne, Amleth of Fornost, became the first king of Arthedain, and it was through Amleth and his heirs that the line of Isildur would endure, whilst the line of kings of Rhudaur and Cardolan failed. Just so you know, Aragorn was himself a descendant of Amleth of Fornost, so keep track of this line. There are two ways of really looking at the split of Arnor into three pieces. One is to look at it as the natural cultural development of the kingdom, where it was already breaking up into three. But the other way would be almost a more top-down approach, wherein the king imposed the division. And I'm going to kind of sit in the middle between these two theories and say, yes, it was ratified at the top level. It had not been fully finalized between the various dukes and lords of the various parts, and that they kind of began to look at themselves as being either of Cardolan or being of Rhudaur or of being of Arthedain until they each had their own kings. This simply cemented in their minds who they belonged to or where they belonged to. As it was, the kingdom was decentralizing. So decentralization then leads to a formal breakup of the kingdom into three, which leads thus into a different kind of decentralization as each group begins to think of itself as a nation. So it's a bit of both sides kind of compromising almost. Otherwise, in my opinion, Arnor probably would have broken up into smaller pieces than what it already was. And Arnor, as things stood, beginning to weaken already. The kings were getting weaker, obviously less decisive, as in the case of Eorendar. I know that a lot of people will probably be annoyed at this short video regarding Arnor in that it's more about the breakup of the kingdom into three, but I kind of feel it necessary to first kind of examine the geography and the split before getting to the actual wars of Angmar. And thus, this entire podcast will be focused on action, each major event, and examining it historic standpoint within the world of the Legendarium. So if you enjoyed this video, do feel free to smash that like and that subscribe button as though you were Sauron seeking to put an end to Gil-galad.